Subra, I'm going to ask you about 2008. I want to know from you, what is your experience of 2008?
This is when the share that you buy goes up, you believe all the stories.
If you want to talk about what were the big mistakes that you observed in the market in 2008, what were they?
It's such a mind thing that when you sell, you look like an idiot in a bull market. When you buy, you look like an idiot in a bear market.
Why don't you talk about what was happening on the promoter side, what was happening on the investment banking, iBanking side, what was happening on the IPO side, what was happening on the private placement side, and what is happening on the valuation side.
So as a shareholder or as a promoter, if you love your shareholder as you love your employees and your customers, you should see what do I do to deserve that. That was lacking. One day when the music stopped, this guy raised maybe 100 crores, but he lost 50 crores. Right? So the beliefs of the 1970s, 80s is still on. People believe entering the market through an IPO is. All the learning of Morgan Stanley happened at the cost of the Indian investor, which we happily paid.
How did you manage not to buy into those other, emerging blue chips, newbie companies? Rarely has a bull run not thrown up any heroes for the future. Can you think of any heroes from the 2008 bull run who still survived? Do you foresee in this decade that we could still have a few, guys rising from the ashes? Is that a concept which has to be given a permanent burial, or is there a chance of revival?
I don't see it unless you know that this Prime Minister and his cabinet is going to last for 10 years. But every 4 years, if the Prime Minister changes and priorities change, I seriously don't know how it will happen.
Subra, I'm going to ask you about 2008. For me, every bull market is the same because I have always stayed away from the flavor of the season, and generally I am only a spectator. I have never held stocks which are the flavor of the season and which are hyped. So I observe, and I am probably in another space which nobody wants, and then probably over a period of time I sell them. But a lot of people have this extraordinary capacity to hold on to stocks till they become the flavor of the season, and they also participate in almost the entire bull run. If you see the 2008 bull run, it was fueled by liquidity. It was fueled by lending post 2004.
Correct.
And it was fueled by the confidence to raise equity whenever people want.
True.
So the size of what people imagined should be their business went way beyond what was the size they could manage.
True.
Of a business. And when that happened, market caps went out of control. Now, participating in something like this, to me, doesn't come easy. But I want to know from you, what is your experience of 2008? Did you participate in it? If so, how did you participate in it? Did stocks you already own participate in it, or did you enter new stocks? I'll start with this and then I'll add more questions.
Yes, 2008 was a boom where I participated, but it was not as though I added those shares because I knew it was going to boom. But I always thought Tata Power, Larsen & Toubro, Cholamandalam and Kotak Bank, I thought they were good shares, and I bought them, and they went up dramatically. When you buy a share like Cholamandalam for dividend yield and it goes up 5x or does things like that, you realize that look, something is wrong. But I didn't really know, because what happens is when the share that you buy goes up, you believe all the stories. Oh, good quality management, Tata Power, Tata Group, power, infrastructure, how can it go wrong, etc. Luckily for me, I bought a book by Ken Fisher, having bought that book, I said, let me ask myself some questions. I think that book said 3 questions to ask. And I realized in a 45-minute journey from buying the book and going home, I took out my portfolio and I sold infrastructure. I sold Larsen & Toubro, I sold Tata Power, I sold Cholamandalam, I sold Kotak. Many of these shares had gone berserk. I think, if I'm not wrong, Tata Power had a PE of 100. I remember BHEL selling BHEL 300 or something like that, and amazing prices had happened. And these, I have not added them because it was going up. This was there in my portfolio anyway. I said, okay, partially at least let me get out. So I got out and I didn't know what to buy. So I was sitting on cash when the crash happened, and I was thrilled that the ROI on that book is infinite. So reading is a great way of seeing what kind of mistakes people made, because in the past, greed and fear and jealousy and anger, right from Mahabharata times, have been the same. It just changes form. That time they fought with some other tools, now they're fighting with some other tools, but the same envy and all that is there. So you see, I was just lucky that I bought the book and read it on the way. So I think ROI on reading and reading, understanding and applying. It's not just you can't.
What is the time frame between the time you read the book and the time you did what you...
24 hours.
Next day?
24 hours. Next day.
So how did you get to read the book? Everybody doesn't get to read exactly what they need to act upon.
Absolute luck. I had gone to the bookshop and he said, sir, naya book aaya hai. I picked that book, and Ken Fisher, I said, Phil Fisher's Son Can't Be Too Bad. I picked up that book, read it in the 45-minute journey. It's a big book. 45-minute journey, I picked up enough. Next day morning, and I act quickly. I said, tuck, I sold off. I was sitting on cash, market fell. This is luck. I would think this is luck and skill combination. Luck to have picked up that book. I could have picked up some other book. Luck to have read it, luck to have understood and applied it the next day.
If you want to talk about what were the big mistakes that you observed in the market in 2008, what were they? What will you bring to the front?
Actually, I wouldn't just say 2008. In every market, your portfolio becomes very lopsided with the shares which are participating. So if FMCG doesn't participate, pharma doesn't participate, and banking doesn't participate, and only infra is participating, suddenly 60% of your portfolio is infra, or 50% of your portfolio is infra. So regularly, if you rebalance, you would have got rid of infra anyway. But what happens is you look like an idiot. Let's say you have 10,000 shares, you sell 200 shares, and then the price goes up further. Funnily, you're not happy that with the 9,800 you're holding, you feel sad that you sold 200. It sounds very stupid. Overall, you're making more money because you're still holding on to 9,800, but the mind says, I told you not to sell. Why did you sell these 200 shares? Otherwise, 10,000 into 100 rupees is bigger than 9,800 into 100. It's such a mind thing that when you sell, you look like an idiot in a bull market. When you buy, you look like an idiot in a bear market. The willingness to look like an idiot, even to your own eyes, for a short period of time is very important to look smart in the long run.
Okay. And you mentioned about what was wrong with one side of the market, which is the investor side. I want to know more about the promoter side. Why don't you talk about what was happening on the promoter side, what was happening on the investment banking, iBanking side, what was happening on the IPO side, what was happening on the private placement side, and what is happening on the valuation side. One by one. First, let's start with the promoter side.
So every promoter gets greedy, and it's very funny. A promoter whose share is quoting at 90 rupees suddenly sees his price go up to 390, and some investment banker will come to him and say, we can raise money at 10 plus 380. Right? So he will raise money at 10 plus 380. Now comes the funny part. The promoter gets much more than what he needs. Maybe he needed 30 crores or 40 crores. He gets 100 crores because the investment banker says, you're getting money, take it. And now investment banker is a hero because he has raised money for you at 10 plus 380. The same guy comes, takes away your money to put into something else which is 10 plus 490 for somebody else. So this guy, theoretically, the market says, look, he raised so much money, but that investment banker did let him keep it. he put it somewhere else. So that was happening. Obviously, the hat was being passed, and people were doing that. So that you could see. I mean, there were some companies were so hell bent on doing pricing and placing at higher price, and so that was visible. So this was the greed of the promoter, greed of the investment banker. I don't know how many of those investment bankers even exist today.
Okay.
But one of those investment bankers was told by the promoter, when you raise money for you, your relationship with me is over. But when I raise money with the from the shareholder, my relationship with him starts. This is such a beautiful line because it is not the end of a relationship. If I give you money at 10 plus 390, I expect value from it, right?
Correct.
So when a Manish Pobrai pays money to have lunch with Warren Buffett, Warren Buffett knows how much he has paid, and Warren Buffett wants to add value to that lunch. So as a shareholder or as a promoter, if you love your shareholder as you love your employees and your customers, you should see what do I do to deserve that. That was lacking.
So you are saying that there are no free lunches. Now let us go to the next thing. The first part you mentioned is that promoter raised money. That money was raised for him by the investment banker. What the right hand gave, the left hand took away because the investment banker bought some other deal which was more expensive and which made him invest in that company, which probably didn't do much.
One day when the music stopped, this guy raised maybe 100 crores, but he lost 50 crores.
All right.
That was a big
What
one.
about the IPOs, the investors, or the QIPs? Can you talk about the other side of the table? People who were giving the money, what happened to them?
See,
What were they
people-
doing and what happened?
No, there is very slow updation of belief. So somebody believes this is a good group, they keep on believing it's a good group, even though there is a lot of evidence that your newer companies are not adding any great value, but people don't update. Similar updation is that 1977, 1980 and all, when CCI was doing the pricing, and CCI was either miserly or corrupt or whatever, they were not allowing too much of a premium. So if you applied, you made money. It was very simple. Every stag made money, everybody made money. That still will believe, right? So the beliefs of the 1970s, 80s is still on. People believe entering the market through an IPO is not risky, and therefore you should enter the market through an IPO. I mean, Morgan Stanley Mutual Fund, people stood in the queue to apply, and Morgan Stanley kept all the money that they received. Now, do you think an Indian company can raise money like that in US? No. But an American company could come and raise money like that in US. People lost money, and then Morgan Stanley left. All the learning of Morgan Stanley happened at the cost of the Indian investor, which we happily paid. We are not learning. Every IPO is overpriced. OFS is overpriced.
So 2008 also was like this. Everything was overpriced.
Absolutely.
So what happened to those investments? Can you just give a brief
I don't
recollection of
remember,
what happened to many of these companies? And
I don't remember a public issue so much, but I remember private placement of, say, a company like Pateja Forging. I mean, they raised a lot of money. It was supposedly a good company, but after that, the promoters just vanished. We have no clue where they are, right? So these kind of things happened. I mean, that is Videocon. Videocon raised a lot of money, and they did a lot of private placement. Then they raised Jain Irrigation. All these companies raised money. We don't know where they went. They
I'm
did
talking the
ICDs.
power and infra side.
See, what happens is when there is an infra or a power boom, companies suddenly want to launch a power and infra company.
So everybody wants to get in.
Yeah, so Jaiprakash Power, Tata Power did not launch a power company because of the power boom. It's a 100-year-old company. But you can't say that for every other company. Look at Reliance Power. It didn't make any money for any shareholder. I don't think even the promoter made money, right? So those kind of things where so many companies, power companies and all had come, which were to put up a small plant, big plant. Where are they? We don't even know where they are, right? So they just vanished. Vanishing companies is a very, very big problem. Not more than 200
So
companies.
most of these power and infra companies seem to have vanished with just 10, 11 years.
Yeah.
And you say that you sold your best holdings. How did you manage not to buy into those other, emerging blue chips, newbie companies, and many of them? Because I know how the valuations went up for many of them.
I think I didn't get enough time.
You didn't get time.
or something like that. And I said, okay, I need to keep money. When price falls, I'll buy the same shares, which I bought.
I still remember that Unitech had benefited because it was in real estate, gone up multiple times.
True.
And then, like it was like the mother of all announcements, they announced that they are going with Uninor, which was their telecom venture, and they had got their licenses and they're doing all these things. And it went up further at a time when they were taking risks which was way beyond their capacity to handle. The markets cheered, and markets even probably gave money to them.
I think the DLF market cap was more than the Tata Group market cap.
Correct.
If I'm not wrong.
In 2008, it was very high. Yes.
It is ridiculous.
So how did you view these things? Did you try to trade in them, or you stayed away from them, or you were angry it's happening emotionally? Because investors are always found short of the right emotion or the right frame of mind when something happens around them which they don't find acceptable. So did you find this acceptable? Did you find it amusing, or did it affect you? I want you to talk about 2008 specifically.
See, what happened was my portfolio was good, and I knew one thing: construction companies based in Delhi or construction companies based in Hyderabad, I wouldn't touch any company which was based in Delhi or Hyderabad, unless if it's an MNC. If a Britannia is located in Bombay or Calcutta or Delhi, I'm indifferent, because you know that they have accidentally come to that place. But any promoter whose origins are from a place which I find a little shady, I just wouldn't touch. So therefore I did not.
No, but when those prices went up, how did you feel?
No, because I think my training as a CAL, because even while doing articles, even Larsen & Toubro's construction division, we would struggle to understand what was happening. So I remember Indian Express wanted me to do an article on some of these construction companies, and I just didn't understand head nor tail as to how they were accounting and all that. I never liked that sector. And in that sector, you couldn't find a good company. There was no gold standard except Larsen & Toubro or something like that. You had no other anybody to copy. So you could not pick up an accounting principle and see how Larsen & Toubro is doing and how somebody else is doing. All those things were lacking. So I said, let me just stay away. Tata Power, yes, I didn't sell all my shares. I sold some of my shares. I still benefited. I still hold Tata Power, even though they made those big mistakes. I just held on for last so many decades, so I have no regrets on that. I'm happy I sold some of it, because even that was terribly overvalued.
If you notice, the poster boys of 2008 bull run, almost all of them are not in business anymore, or they are too weak even to operate. Rarely has a bull run not thrown up any heroes for the future. Can you think of any heroes from the 2008 bull run who still survived?
I don't think so.
It was complete decimation.
And even older companies which did not come just because of the 2008 thing, they went up dramatically. Some of them which came back are still alive. I mean, Kotak Bank has done very well, Chola has done very well. These were the ones which had really benefited by the boom. They also crashed, but because they were good Tata Power, they all had the ability to come back. Some of the others just vanished, including companies like, say, Reliance Power and all. Though Reliance Power, I think, was a little later, they just vanished. I mean,
most of the
operational.
construction companies are gone.
Yeah.
Most of the real estate companies are nowhere. Most of the power companies are in a problem. Most of the infra asset builders
Yes.
are nowhere.
Yes.
Almost all of them seem to have only reached the same conclusion, which is bankruptcy or a very near.
I
point to
would
that.
not blame only the promoters, because putting up a project in India is very high risk. Because you are told that you set up an airport and you can charge so much per passenger, then there is public, they'll say you can't charge 350 per passenger, you have to charge only 150. A toll road, people protest, they'll say you can't charge toll. So the risk is very high, so you have to be a government who can run up with say, oh, we thought it would be 1700 crores, but it is actually 8000 crores. So cost overrun, debt equity ratio, nothing matters, because it's the state government or central government on one side. That is how project costs are. To get an retail guy or a private guy to come in and lose money and make money, look at what happened to Z. I have a lot of respect for that group. Till they entered infra and burned their hand, legs and everything. Right? It was a good company. SL Propack is a good company, was a good company under Z management. But they just lost their shirt and pant on infrastructure. In this country, to be in infrastructure is very high risk. I mean, Shapoorji Pallonji and Tatas have suffered there.
So there are no winners. Even
I
today.
can't see in infra, I can't see winners unless it's very tightly created.
12, 13 years later, there are no winners. Now I'm going to give two parallels and ask you a question. 2000, there was a crash in tech, and then you saw most of the companies going down, but the few big names have become phenomenally bigger between 2012 and 21, these 9 years. 2008, you are seeing what happened in the infra companies. They are now 13 years since 2008. Do you foresee in this decade that we could still have a few, guys rising from the ashes, even in the infra space, to create very, very large entities and also a lot of shareholder value? Do you think that is possible?
No, I don't think it's possible because I think to be successful in India, you have to make a product which is sold abroad or sold in India. You should not have the government as your raw material supplier or your end user. And you can't create infrastructure without having government at one of the.
They are only spending, no doubt about it.
They are spending. So if I put up a airport, I'm stuck. Maybe planes come, planes don't come, maybe the places are taken up. But unless I can control the government and make the government behave. Look at how the government has behaved in Vodafone case and Kane Energy
Yes.
case. They've gone to the international court, lost and still refused to pay. And now they're saying we'll refund your money, we will not pay interest, right? So you cannot fight the government. So best way for companies to do is to stay away from the government. Unless the government decides, the government calls me and says this is infrastructure to be created, we will do all the funding. We will pay the contractor, you just do the execution and we will do all the financing, then it's fine. I don't take responsibility for the vendor or for the end user or anything. That can work. So some kind of a JV between a government and a private guy where the government takes full responsibility. I mean, how many Nitin Gadkaris will you find? One Nitin Gadkari comes, he cleans up, he does things, and you don't know what will happen to that same department if he is not there.
So you're
Very
saying
high
that,
risk.
you're saying that there's no visibility that wealth can be created through.
I can't see. I mean,
space.
maybe there is visibility, but I can't see. I'm sure big infrastructure funds and all may put money in that, but I don't see. I mean, I see this country needing infrastructure,
Alright.
but I do not know how it will. It's like saying everybody needs a pension, right? You need a pension. You have the money to pay for it. But your servant needs a pension, but if she can't pay for it, who is going to give her the pension? She
So
has
the
to
problem you are
contribute.
saying is in the way assets are conceived and created, and way profits are made in both these conception and execution stages.
Right.
So you are saying that it is not possible to participate in the conception and execution of projects. It is very difficult to make money in EPC or in a project management or in implementation of a big project asset creation. Now I am trying to first accept that on face value and ask you a secondary question. From 2008 till today, whatever may be the inefficiencies of our society in different areas, we have still managed to create a huge pile of infra assets, right? And these infra assets have been functional for more than 10-12 years. Most people who created these assets have lost ownership or possession of these assets.
Correct.
These assets are still valuable if they are given a haircut or if they are recapitalized. That recapitalization could lead to these assets, which are fully functional, return generating assets, getting bundled into products, into vehicles, and then those vehicles becoming a source of income to a huge number of investors. What is your thought on this concept? I know that the same idea failed miserably in 2008. We all know ILFS and there are IDFC and various other entities, and what happened to their SPVs. And we know the fate of SPVs of several of these infra companies and what happened.
Absolutely.
That given, is that a concept which has to be given a permanent burial, or is there a chance of revival that some other better way of doing this exists, and that could lead to an opportunity to play infra in the future? Do you think there is an option?
I think there is an option, and I would first create a robust debt market. So if I were putting up an airport, I would issue 30-year zero coupon bonds. In India, 30-year zero coupon bonds have to have the government backing. So if the government says, if you put up a project like airport or things like that, we will let you create zero coupon bonds at whatever rate, and we will partially stand guarantee. A lot of insurance companies and a lot of individuals, I would happily buy a zero coupon bond at the age of 60, which is the 30-year bond, knowing at 90 it will have the maturity. That's fine, because instead of buying an annuity, I would buy that. Or if I am a company which is providing annuity, I may buy that, right? I may want money after 10 years. If you want a pension after 10 years, I would buy a zero coupon bond, which after 10 years will give me the maturity. I'll take money from you and invest it there. So so I think retail products have to be developed. And once you make those instruments, you can create those companies. Those companies have to be JVs. I'm sure companies from abroad will invest. And I have to be protected by saying a judge won't come and say that you cannot run this company, you cannot run this road, people have to go free, or planes have to land free. I want to be protected against our law, in the sense that you can't change the law with retrospective effect. I need that protection. Vodafone is a case like that, right? I need that guarantee, I need the government guarantee, I need very, very brave promoters who are willing to take a 30-year view or 40-year view. Surely they'll make money. All over the world, infrastructure companies make a lot of power utilities, make a lot of money. But today, to set up a Tata Power is going to require a lot of money. A great entrepreneur with huge amounts of money, it's not going to be easy. Even assuming, look at ILFS. People said it is quasi-government, but nothing happened. And yes, a lot of wrong things happened, but a lot of right things also happened in ILFS. Everything is bundled and said ILFS is a crisis. Somebody has to sit and break it up to see whether there was corruption, bad idea, badly implemented.
It's still early days, according to you, to figure out whether an opportunity can come out of the capital allocation mistakes done in the last decade in infra. You are not seeing that.
Yeah, I don't see it unless you know that this Prime Minister and his cabinet is going to last for 10 years. But every 4 years, if the Prime Minister changes and priorities change, I seriously don't know how it will happen. I'm sure there will be great ideas with great people. I don't see.
No, I was trying to draw parallels with tech, because tech again became a wealth creator.
No, but remember, the best thing about tech, you spent in rupees, you earned in dollars, and the government had no role. Government had zero role. Whatever it is, government had zero role. Maybe they give you bandwidth or things like that, very small role.
So you will broadly stay out of this, and with the exception of a few companies which you are comfortable with, which you already own for a long time, you are not looking at buying it.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Infra is a pass.
Infra, I don't mind participating in infra through an infra fund, where I'm assuming that the fund manager is capable of doing due diligence.
So you're saying go to a mutual fund? That's safer. I don't want to take stock.
I don't understand.
Thank you, Subra. I think 2008 was like the killing fields. There are no heroes who have even survived, and it's a very, very sad situation. Luckily, though, the people who fought those battles have lost their money, and most of the promoters are, financially dead. The assets they built still exist to tell the story. They exist in the hands of new owners. They also exist in the hands of the financial institutions who will lend to them, and they exist with the courts trying to decide who should take which asset. So that is still getting resolved. Probably we should have this conversation again when we have clarity about the future of a whole lot of assets which are still stuck on my head in different places.
True.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.